Jared Shuffletosky, and welcome to Conversations at the Effie, where we talk to interesting people from around Kamloops and see what they do, where they're from, and what makes them so interested. Today, my guest is Glenn Hilke, advocate and voice for the marginalized people of Kamloops. As the operator and coordinator of the Loop Drop-In Center, Glenn in the past has been a board member of the Kamloops Food Policy Center, director of the Jubilee Urban Movement Partners Jump, founder of the Big E newspaper and the Gleaning Abundance Project. Glenn Hilke, welcome to the Effie.
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Glenn, I just want to ask you right off the top, how much of your life revolves around food?
Pretty much, I would say 3/4. If I'm not dreaming about it when I'm sleeping, then 24. But for sure, 3/4 of my life revolves around food.
So you are very active in the community. It seems like you're always on the go. You always got some sort of project doing. Is the food you consume essential to keeping your energy levels high?
Yeah, I've been a vegetarian since the age of 18. And I think that, that has helped me stay healthy. I'm 68 years old right now, and I try to eat healthy each and every day, but I heard a phrase recently that I think I'm becoming a victim of, which is the activist diet, which basically means that you don't eat enough, and you don't eat on time, and you don't eat well. So I'm working on that right now to kind of bring things back into a balance.
So if it's hard enough for us, in privileged society to eat well, how hard is it for people in the marginalized communities on the street? How hard is it for them to get the proper food?
So, it varies in terms of difficulty on a case-by-case basis, right? From an individual living alone, maybe in a rooming house and not having access to the proper cooking utensils and supplies, to a family living in a motel, experiencing the same situation, to a person on the street. But, the bottom line is that we have to recognize that here in Kamloops, we have over 7,000 people that are enrolled at the food bank. And I would think there probably are another 3,000 or 4,000 people in the city that are not enrolled, that are struggling to make ends meet. And when you look at the basic social assistance that people get for an individual, that has been increased twice in the last 3 or 4 years, which is great, but still it's under $1,000 a month. And where do you find a studio apartment in Kamloops with utilities included for $1,000 a month? You don't. So people are paying literally 100% of whatever income they have to their rent, which leaves them absolutely zero for food. So yeah, their food intake is based on what they can get at dollar stores, what they can get in pharmacies, what they can get in places like Lowboy Market. But many people have to come to places like the Loop, Mustard Seed, the Pit Stop, and so on, just to get enough sustenance to get by every day.
Where do you learn this these statistics? Like, is it from education, or is it from research? Where do you learn about?
Good question. So it comes from just about everywhere, right? So we participate in many of what's called the roundtables in Kamloops, right? So whether it's the Food Policy Council, or another one's called the Community Action Team, which deals with the opioid overdose crisis, or the Community Action Board, which deals with homelessness. There are many of these roundtables, and there are representatives from different organizations on them, and they share their stories, they share their experience, they share their statistics. But we learn a lot just from the streets, right? When you get into conversations with people, and you understand that they don't have enough money to buy their prescription drugs because they paid everything into rent and a little bit of food, and they're eating dry ramen, bags for their lunch, you learn very quickly just how desperate things are in Kamloops right now.
So you grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
How is Kamloops today different from Brooklyn, New York?
Man, with the exception of pizza pie, the pizza pie really sucks here. Bagels, I don't know where we get good bagels yet in Kamloops. I'm still looking. How is it different? There aren't enough pedestrians on the streets of Kamloops. New York City is a pedestrian city, but so is Montreal, where I moved here from before I came to Kamloops. I would say, you know, there are some similarities in the sense that Kamloops, being a middle-sized Canadian city, still has a small-town feeling, right? And you kind of find, just like you do in New York City, you kind of find like, what's my Kamloops? Like, where's my city in Kamloops, right? Is it downtown or on the North Shore? Is it a little bit of both? Where are my hangouts? And you know, that's how you make your life socially around the place that you live in. And it's the same thing in Brooklyn and New York, it's very neighborhood based. You know, some people's entire existence in New York City is within a 10 square block radius, as opposed to, you know, the incredible magnitude of what that city is and what it has to offer.
Now, New York City, they went in the 80s in response to the crack epidemic, had some really strong controversial policies like the broken window theory and stop and frisk. When we're experiencing the opioid epidemic right now and seeing a lot of more street crime and people on the streets in Kamloops, what can we learn from those experiences?
We don't have enough statistics really to know what is the relationship between theft, vandalism, other petty crimes, or serious crimes, and substance use in Kamloops.
Can you describe then, what does lived experience mean?
That's a very good question because it's an evolving phrase, right? At one point, lived experience was pretty much really centered around what you might consider to be the most hardcore, challenging, chronic kinds of experiences. So, you know, I'm a quadriplegic. That lived experience of a person with, you know, disability or what we refer to as diverse ability, or a person who is chronically homeless. Those would be considered, back in the beginning of that phrase, lived experience. Now lived experience is also being called living experience. So in other words, it's like it's never in your past. You're always going through it. It's like working through PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for those listening that don't know that acronym. But it's an evolving phenomena, and it touches and should touch really any group of and individual that have found themselves, for whatever reason, in the midst of a challenge in their lives that, you know, they hope to overcome or may need lifetime assistance coping with. So whether that is a woman that's been raped, a young child that's been sexually abused by a family member or a stranger, you know, those are lived experiences that people, you know, don't get over and have a memory of and are impacted throughout their life.
Do you find that having lived or living experience is beneficial to help people?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've learned a lot since I came here to Kamloops. It's not, you know, the only time that I've worked with people who are going through, you know, challenges in their life, whether they are socioeconomic or health challenges or housing challenges. But since I've come here to Kamloops, I've really learned, I would say, the majority of what I understand now in terms of lived experience. And, you know, if I look at my own life, I would say, yes, I have lived experience. I grew up in a very violent neighborhood in Brooklyn that was rife with alcoholism, racism, all sorts of discrimination. As a young artist, I had fairly long periods of time where I didn't have, as my father would say, a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. And I used to just literally like climb through my friends' windows at night and go to sleep on their couches, with or without their permission. So, that lived experience, you know, but I've always considered my own experience, as minor as it was, I would say, in a comparison to what I know that other people are going through. I've always, and I don't know if I coined this phrase or not, but I've always been what I consider part of the privileged poor. So I could always call up a friend or an aunt and say, hey, can I borrow $500 until whatever, right? And, hopefully get through that period of time until, the next grant came through or the next gig came through. But yeah, the lived experience is something that I think if the general public started looking into their own lives and understanding that, yes, it's not an embarrassment, yes, I do have lived experience too, that they might, start to understand and develop a greater sense of empathy for people that they look down upon now as just being like losers because they can't pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
As an artist, what's your preferred medium?
Oh, for sure, the stage. Yeah, I do dabble from time to time in poetry and sketching and drawing, but the stage. And when I say the stage, before I came to Kamloops, I had no clue that I could be a burlesque performer and a cross-dressing burlesque performer, for that matter. So yeah, whether it's performance art, whether it's kind of performance installation, burlesque, solo shows, ensemble shows, yeah, the stage is a great place to be.
Well, as a youth, what was your dream as an artist? What were you trying to achieve?
I had no youthful artistry. I did not know that I had an interest in theater in real terms until I was 22. And that happened in a very unusual situation. Prior to that, the only contact I had with performance on stage was when I was growing up as a teenager. My family would go up to the Catskills, to those summer resorts. And those weeks that we spent there would always culminate with the adults putting on a performance. And usually the men were all dressed in drag for some reason. I have no idea why. So it was like a variety show that they would do. And I would watch these shows, and they were always fascinating and interesting. And I'm sure that had something to do with me knowing that it was okay to dress up as a woman, once I got here to Kamloops.
Is there a defining moment that you can look back and reflect and actually pinpoint when you decided that you needed to give back?
Yes, I can, yeah. We traveled back to North Carolina, and there I met a woman who was a playwright and a poet who lived in a tiny little cabin in the woods outside Greensboro, North Carolina. And she worked in prisons in North Carolina. And when I met her, she looked like, it's hard to describe, she was all in black, and it was the middle of the summer. And she was sitting in a rocking chair, and she was probably in her 40s at that time. She looked like she could have been in her 80s or 90s. And she just started telling me about her experiences of working in prisons and how she went in there as a writer, but as a facilitator. In other words, she was helping people understand how to get in touch with their creativity. And that's when the light bulb went off. Because we know as artists, we have a way to connect to the sources of inspiration and creativity inside ourselves to manifest whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's a sculpture, a performance, a stand-up comedy show, as you know, you're so good at. And that's when the light went off. I said, this is something that I should explore. And I wound up working in prisons in the state of Georgia for 5 years, everywhere from what they called transitional houses, so places where men and women would leave, whether it was a state prison or a federal prison, and then go into kind of like a collective living environment. I worked with death row inmates in Georgia. So what we did was we would work on plays together that they would write, that I would basically just facilitate as a director, playwright, and actor, but it would be them that would do the performances. So yeah, so that was one of many experiences that I've had about answering your question about artists as activists, artists as facilitator, artists as community-based artist, right, as opposed to a traditional kind of pathway that an artist might take. And one other thing I can tell you, I've had many occasions to address art students, especially theater students in universities over the years. And I've said to them, over the years, I've been able to continue working as an artist in one way or another. And I have what I would call horizontal fame, right? So they say, what is that? And I say, well, most actors, right, are like this. Their life is like this. They're like, I got a role, I'm slinging pizzas. I got a role, I'm working as a paralegal. I got a role, I'm doing dishes, right? I said, if you came to understand as an artist, no matter what discipline, that there are so many more schools, nursing homes, senior centers, prisons, hospitals, homeless shelters, keep going, all of these places where you could potentially work, as opposed to comparing that number of opportunities versus how many stages are available to you on a regular basis. And so that's horizontal fame.
You worked on a global scale with the International Youth for Peace and Justice Tour. And here in Kamloops, you're way more down on a local level. Is that because you see the need for a local support, or is Kamloops not big enough to work on a global scale?
Oh no, there are projects here that work globally. I can't remember the name of the one that's right down on Victoria Street. I think their offices are up above Bikini Bill's shop. And they do like development projects in developing countries. So no, there's plenty of opportunities, to get engaged here with existing projects, or if you have a vision to create something of your own that would then go national or international. But no, when we came to Kamloops, we knew absolutely nobody here, like zero. And this is a weird story, and I'm going to keep it really brief because I don't want to take up too much time. But when I was doing a project in Montreal called Open City Productions, and one of our projects was to bring cabarets into homeless shelters after they had supper. So we would get buskers, artists that work in the metro, artists of all different disciplines to come in, but it was an open mic concept. Long story short, the first night we did it, there was a guy who was homeless, who took advantage of the open mic, read an incredible poem, sang an incredible song, borrowed the guitar from a busker that was a right-handed guitar, turned it over and played it left-handed. He followed us for weeks and months after that. We wound up helping him get out of shelter. We hired him. He actually ran this program for 5 years. And one night I said, "Good night, I'll see you tomorrow." And I did not see him for 15 years until 2 weeks after I moved here. And we crossed paths just down the street from where I live. And I was like holding him, thinking I was like tripping on acid, not knowing what the fuck was going on. And I said to him, "What is this?" And he just said to me, "What took you so long to get here?" And he was working with the homeless community. And that was my introduction to the work that I've been doing since I moved here in 2012. And to answer your question, yes, I've dug in very much on the local level. And it's been a great experience for me because prior to the day in and day out of that frontline work, my experiences were more on the level of producer, right? No matter what project I was working in. Yes, I had contact with whether it was the artists or the activists or the social workers, but the day in and day out of really putting your hands in the mud, as they say, sticking your face in the toilet bowl, that is something that I learned in a much more deeper way since I came here.
Do you think activism is learned behavior, or is that something that is from within?
I think it's learned behavior. I mean, we're definitely a product of our environment, right? Is there a genetic code that might open up in one's body at some time around activism? I don't know. My parents were not activists. My grandparents were not activists. I mean, I could tell you little stories of things that I heard that might be activism related. That my great grandfather was a self-taught chiropractor who used to go into Harlem in his truck with his friend's piano in the back and give free adjustments in Harlem. So that's activism. But Other than that, no. I mean, I'm a baby boomer, obviously. I am a person that lived through the social justice movement of the 60s. I'm a Vietnam War draft dodger. But when I decided to not go into the Vietnam War, it's not because I had a background in activism. Honestly, at that point, when I got the letter saying I had to come for my physical at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was a rock and roll musician at that time, probably staying up until 4 a.m. every morning, I just said, shit, I ain't getting up that early. And I never went, but I didn't even know about going to Canada, right, as a draft dodger. So I just disappeared into the Chinatown district of New York City for a few years as a rock and roll musician, off the grid. So it's learned behavior. Over the years, yes, I've had many, many experiences where I've met incredible activists like the Berrigan brothers, Philip and Daniel Berrigan, who taught me everything that I know about civil disobedience, because they were greatly involved for decades in civil disobedience acts. So yeah, I do believe it's a learned behavior, yeah.
Do you think your kids are following in your footstep? Are they activists?
My daughter is an activist. She's involved in theater just like I am. My older son, no. My younger son, yeah, he works at the Loop with his summer job right now. And when we moved to Kamloops, he was volunteering with me. He knows the ropes. Will he follow in the footsteps, or be a rebelling adolescent and go to work for TD Bank instead? I don't know yet.
You've gone from winning awards like Project of the Year from the Chamber of Commerce to being declared a nuisance by the city of Kamloops. Where do you go for support and celebration?
Kamloops is, it's funny how I've come to understand how, the system, the bureaucracy, the machine works here in terms of who gets celebrated and who gets condemned, right? So we work on a complaint basis, pure and simple. You got a complaint, you call bylaws, or now it's called community services, and they must respond. One call, one complaint, they got to respond. They're not going to say, that's just one complaint. We'll wait and see if we get another one, or if we get 10, and then if we get 10, we'll look into it. This is how it works here. If you call city council or the mayor, well, then you definitely only need one call for the machine to kick in. 100, this guy or this organization or that group association is fantastic, don't mean all in this town. It doesn't weigh in. It doesn't weigh in with the media. It certainly doesn't weigh in terms of how the bureaucracy works. So the situation that I'm going through now from a professional basis, and I don't mean professionally from a personal professional, but professionally within the organization and all the volunteers and staff that we work, is challenging and difficult. And it mostly impacts me knowing that the people that have committed themselves to this work, they feel insulted by the lies and the falsehoods and the myths that are out there circulating about them and the organization that they are so proud to work with. Personally, for me, I don't give a fuck. It doesn't bother me whatsoever, honestly. I get plenty of text messages and other Facebook things that count, right? That make that balance between the complaint-based system and people saying, we got your back, keep on doing what you're doing, whatever it might be. Here's $50, keep doing what you're doing. Can I buy you a beer? All of those things, help keep the balance. And yeah, I mean, the award you talked about, that was so ironic. I mean, like 4 years ago, we were in the similar situation that we're in now. And of all prizes to win for what was a very controversial project back then, that was called the Royal Social Club, we win the Project of the Year with the Chamber of Commerce. So that shut everybody up for a while, right? Until, the next round of, how do we get rid of homeless and poor people? So it's unfortunate, but there is a war on poor people here in Kamloops right now. And I use that specifically, poor people. Yeah.
Do you think that your friends and family encourage you more?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the balance is on support. I mean, I think people that are very empathetic and do participate, whether they are supporters of our organization or others or multiple, that sense of empathy and understanding and education that they've either put themselves through or they got themselves, has lent itself to myself personally feeling continued support, but at the same time, because they're not necessarily involved at the same level and with the same complexity, they, at times they'll be like, maybe it's time to, think about doing something else. But, they understand that this is the bread and butter, so to speak, yeah.
You've made a couple of attempts at joining the dark side, you might say, running for town council or for mayor. Is there a politician that you look at that really embodies your values? A politician at any level of government, anywhere in the world?
Presently elected or attempted to get elected?
Yeah, I would say just any well-known politician, alive or dead.
Bill Sundu is somebody I have great respect for. And I know he's running for the NDP, for the federal seat. He's a dedicated human rights lawyer, and I think a great politician, whether he's holding a seat or not. Other politicians, if we're just talking about Kamloops right now, I'm happy that there are more female city councilors right now, and I hope, and I know that they've tried to become their own squad, like they have in the United States, of progressive elected officials, and I do hope that they are able to gain more success for some of the initiatives that they are attempting to do. Yeah.
Have you renounced your American citizenship? Do you still vote?
No, I got close, man. When Trump was there, I really got close. Now, I've been a dual citizen since 1989, I think it is, or 1990. And do I plan to right now? No, I don't. My children all have dual citizenship. My wife hasn't expressed any interest in getting it, although I'm sure she would probably be able to in some way or another. But no, not right now.
Are you hopeful for the future?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. Not. Man, yeah, I guess I have to say yes. One of my favorite expressions that I certainly didn't come up with, but one of the great anti-war and social justice activists of the United States, since we're talking about the US a little bit, Abby Hoffman, revolution for the hell of it. If you're doing it, if you're an activist because you have expectations for idealistic outcomes, or you think you're going to get to the to the goal line in your lifetime, you're probably dreaming, especially in the times that we're living in right now. So activism for the hell of it, yeah, why not? Keep your eyes on the prize. It gives you a reason to wake up in the morning, have that extra shot of espresso, and that shot of tequila. Thank you for the tequila again, Aaron.
Well, thank you, Glenn, for joining us today, and I hope our viewers enjoyed peeking a little bit behind the curtains there into your life, and I hope maybe you've inspired somebody to look at the world a little bit differently, and to maybe help out at the Loop if necessary, making sandwiches or just having a bit more compassion for people that use your services.
Sure. If anybody's interested, call 250-879-0465 and you'll talk to me. And thank you for doing this. This is a great initiative. It's long overdue in our city. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.